Today I want to talk about something that is little understood but often discussed: karma. What is it? How does it happen to us? What does it all involve? How are we personally affected? And so on and so forth. So if you've ever found yourself saying, well, that's just karmic, today we will discuss what that actually means. So hey, if we haven't met before, it's a pleasure to be here with you. My name's Kay, I'm a yogic life coach and author of the book Journey to the Ecstatic Self. Karma, I think, is such a beautiful, nuanced concept that here in the West gets reduced to basically what goes around comes around. And while there is truth in that, and while we can sense that there is some validity to that idea of what you put out in the universe will tend to come back at you, we see instances where that is clearly not the case. As someone in one of my recent videos commented, karma's bullshit. I see people acting like assholes and they still are rich and fabulous and have all these great opportunities, and similarly, some amazing human beings who are poor and destitute and dealing with major health issues. How could karma possibly exist when we see so much injustice in the world? And that is a totally fair comment and observation to make. I feel similarly. I keep sometimes sitting around being like, ooh, when's she gonna get her karmic just desserts? When is she finally gonna get her comeuppance? Because let's face it, there are some people who seem to be doing just fine despite acting atrociously. And meanwhile, we see people that we love, people who are very decent, giving, altruistic human beings who seem to be struggling under a mountain of shit. But even with that, that is still their karma. So let me break down for you, from my understanding, and just from my understanding from my years of yogic practice and self-study and living in an ashram, what karma means to me. So, step one, we cannot talk about karma without first talking about our energy body. So all of our cells are vibrating in different frequencies, sending out a sort of resonance into the universe, and the resonance with which it projects out will tend to find things that are in harmony with that resonance that pull towards us. Like attracts like. It's something we see throughout our life. You tend to find friends who are on the same sort of mental or vibratory level as you. You tend to attract the similar sort of experiences over and over that will shift over time, and there are certainly blips, moments that seem to come out of left field. But more or less, we have a similar type of life usually. You're not going to wake up one day well off living in Chicago and then the next day find yourself destitute living on the streets of Prague. Like, huge shifts like that rarely happen, and when they do, we can kind of see why. We see the things that lead up to it. Anyhow, that's a tangent. The point is, we send out a frequency, we get a frequency back at us that more or less matches our experience of the world. And this energy body is where our karma is stored. There is a term that they use in Sanskrit to help explain a process of karma accumulation, and it is a term called samskara. Samskara translates to mean impression. Here's the key to understanding karma. Every action that you take willfully being the key word, creates an impression on your energetic body that will eventually call to restorative experiences to bring it back into balance. So if through your actions you create a lot of excess, you will eventually pull in experiences to counter that make you understand the lessons of loss and deprivation so that it can return to the middle. It's a little bit like if you dent the side of a garbage can with a golf ball, sometimes you need to apply an opposite and equal force from the opposite direction to bring it back in neutrality. So if you've been spending your life living with greed, at some point you're going to have to experience someone either being greedy to you or having an experience of extreme beneficence where you don't care about the physical world anymore and you just give with a full heart. Now, how these karmic experiences return to you are not necessarily an eye for an eye. It's not you stole from someone, so now someone's going to steal from you. You lied, so someone lies to you. Or positive, that you were very generous and now somebody's very generous to you. That's not how it works. These samskaras, these impressions, create future experiences that you have to go through for your soul to learn the lesson it needs to return back to balance, that we eventually return to a beautifully totally unobstructed energy field. If you see where this line of logic is going, you can tell that this means good karma or bad karma doesn't matter. It's still karma. It's still forced experiences you have to go through. So it's better to get to a point where you've burned or worked through all your karma through living and through spiritual work, so you aren't being pushed and pulled by life. And more so, once all your karma is worked through, it becomes much easier to experience liberation, enlightenment, removal from the process of incarnating and having worldly life, and get to re-merge back with cosmic oneness. And so it's better as we live as spiritual beings on this planet to try to avoid creating new karma. Now wait a minute, Kay, didn't you just say that any action is going to generate karma that we then have to have future experiences to work through? Yeah, he did. But there's a key word here: willful action. If you're coming from a place of manifesting, trying to make things happen, desire, fear, anger, attraction, anything that comes from a place of doership, you're going to generate karma. However, and this is why the practice of surrender is so integral to the yogic path, is when you live in a place of non-doership, a place of letting go and letting and accepting whatever happens without judgment, without manipulation, and in a state of blissful surrender to the cosmos. Everything that happens is what needs to be. I'm filled with joy, I'm filled with gratitude, I'm filled with equanimity and peace, no matter what. And if the universe pushes me into something that I need to do to respond, to help someone or take an action, I'm doing it from the place of, I don't really care if this happens, it's just the right thing to do, versus, I need this to happen, which is a very different place and generates new karma. So when we live in surrender and we just do the next logical step, we stop accumulating new karma, and then through our spiritual work, our meditation, our physical practices, our conscious living, our kindness, we start to burn some of the karmic seeds so that they don't have to sprout. So you can actually prevent the manifestation of some of your karma by living consciously, doing mantra, doing spiritual work, doing all these great things that we talk about on this channel, so that in the future, less and less karma needs to manifest, and you get to be just enjoying life a whole heck of a lot more. Now, there are different layers of karmic events. You have the really deep, intense karma that no matter what you do, it's going to manifest. Things like when you're born, who you'll marry, when you'll die, certain big life changes. Like that's intense karma that you agreed upon in your soul before you incarnated that you were going to go through no matter what. It's never really going to change no matter how much yogic practice, spiritual practice you do. There is, however, a lighter level of karma that can be mitigated through our spiritual work, that instead of breaking your leg, perhaps you just sprain your knee. That if you live consciously and intentionally, then you will still need to go through some sort of lesson, but it may be able to be less intense than otherwise. Then there's lighter level of karma that can be burned up entirely through your spiritual work, where you just don't even have to go through it at all. And it's important to remember with these karmic things, they're not necessarily set in stone per se. Like if your karma is you need to go through an accident, like the universe doesn't really care if you're skiing in Switzerland or hiking in the Andes. If that karma has borne fruit, like it is an apple on a tree ready to drop, it's just gonna drop no matter where you are. And so the way we live can have a huge effect on your own personal experience of karma. I will share for myself that since I've been on a robust spiritual path since I was a late teenager, that I notice that I'm less and less pulled by worldly things, that I find events, these unsettling events that just come out of nowhere, seem to happen less and less as I enter a deeper and deeper state of surrender. Where at this point in my life, I'm pretty much very content and don't really care how much things go. I just do what seems like the next logical step and say I just feel gratitude for most everything that comes into my life. Of course, I'm still a work in progress, but I've achieved a much deeper state of surrender and non-doership, and my experience of karma feels less ferocious. Granted, that may also just be part of getting older, period. Like, I think everyone's teenage years are much more dramatic than their 20s, which is much more dramatic than their 30s. But I'd say compared to my peer group, I feel like my experience is much more joyful, much more light, much more effortless. But when I find myself getting caught up in willfulness, when I find myself desiring, that's when the friction starts. Now, to answer that subscriber's question about how come these shitty things happen to good people and vice versa, karma takes a long time to play out. I've heard people say that really big karmic patterns, really big life lessons, well, one, you actually have to go through it long enough that you really learn the lesson it has to teach you, like really learn it, not just, oh, okay, I think I got it. No, but you've got it. Like, that takes some time. I've heard people say that it can take up to 7 lifetimes to fully go through a karmic cycle. So So you could be going through this for a while. And then when we bring in this idea that the fruit of our actions don't manifest right away, the more evolved spiritually you become, the more expansive and free-flowing your energy is, the more you'll see things returning much more quickly. But as most people are pretty dense and solid in their energy body, they haven't worked to expand and elevate and open, it can take a while for these things to mature. And it's a little bit like planting a garden. You plant a seed, it doesn't sprout right away. And if it sprouts, it certainly doesn't, bloom into a tree and bear fruit. Like, it takes a while. So you are likely experiencing the karma of 15 lives ago, 10 lives ago, 5 lives ago. So you can see people who are learning their karmic lessons about being more generous, more loving, more kind, but they're still working through karma from a while back where they were shitheads. Now, I will say that really bad negative karma, like murdering dozens and dozens of people, can have very quick turnaround for your next life. Like, I've heard numerous spiritual people comment that Hitler was reborn as a cockroach for many incarnations moving forward. So you will get your spiritual comeuppance. It just may not be right now. And for the person who left that comment and then added that they don't believe in reincarnation, they don't believe in multiple lives, well, I'm gonna have to make a separate video on that because that is a whole topic in and of itself. And I have always believed in reincarnation because, well, frankly, it's the only thing that makes sense to me. But I'll save my thoughts on that for a future video. So that's karma in a nutshell. We can dive into further aspects on karma if that's something that really interests you. We can talk more about that one-on-one, or I can do a separate video. But for me, it actually makes life more empowering because suddenly I stopped feeling like a victim. I stopped feeling like things were just happening to me, and suddenly I owned my hardships. I owned the things happening to me and say, hey, there's something I have to learn. These are the results of my own actions, whether I remember them or not, and I'm just gonna be grateful. It's not some spiteful God, it's not some random act of chance. It's, these are the lessons for me. What are they? And perhaps if I can learn my lessons a little more quickly, maybe I'll move through life more gracefully, and maybe not have to endure this for quite as long.